and welcome to this video on preparing for the strategic case study exam. In this video we're going to look at a summary of all the things you need to think about, all the things you need to prepare for in order to pass your strategic case study exam. And the first thing we are going to look at is a few home truths. And one of those things is that hard work pays. Now, I'm sure some of you don't want to hear about the fact that you've got to put a lot of work in, but it really is the starting point for success in this exam. You are not going to pass without putting the work in. And this is completely justified because CIMA need to be sure that you are ready to be a qualified management accountant, and simply doing a half job is not going to be sufficient. So for example, I'll tell you a story about a student. Now, we have taught thousands of people over the course of the years that we have been teaching the strategic case study, some who have worked very hard, some who haven't. And this one particular student took them 4 attempts to pass their exam. And they admitted that the very first time that they did it, they didn't put the work in. And then they put a bit more work in the second time. They put a bit more work in the third time. And finally, by the 4th time, they were really putting the work in. And they passed the exam. And so it's really, really important to put the work in, because it is not an easy exam. It is a very difficult exam, and you are not going to pass if you do not put the required amount of effort in. But if you do work hard, if you do plenty of revision, if you do plenty of exam technique practice, if you do plenty of mock exams, and you ensure that you are prepared for the exam, then there is no reason why you cannot pass this exam the first time. You don't need to be like this student here who took 4 attempts to pass their exam. If you put all the work in, if you understand that before you even begin your preparation for the exam, there is no reason why you cannot pass. And because you need to put this level of work in, you will not be able to just rely on last-minute revision. And a lot of students sometimes treat the strategic case study like it is an objective test. If you think back to your objective test exams, maybe your E3, your F3, your P3, or from management or operational level, you get the textbook a couple of weeks before the exam and you cram it all in and you sit the exam and you pass. You cannot treat it like that, because the main difference between a case study exam and an objective test exam is it's not just about the theory. Yes, the theory is important, but you also have to think about your writing approach. You have to think about your planning approach, your writing technique. You need to take mock exams. You need to do all this sort of preparation that you did not have to do for your objective test exam. So you cannot cram it all into a couple of weeks. You are given the pre-scene 6 to 8 weeks in advance of your exam, and you are expected to work hard throughout that 6 to 8 weeks. And one thing that is even more important for the case study than the objective test is practicing. Because planning is so important, because your ability to identify requirements and plan around those requirements is so important, because your ability to turn those plans into well-rounded answers is so important, you have to practice as much as possible. And we recommend taking at least 5 practice exams about a week apart, with extra time in between to do additional revision, to analyze the results of those practice papers, to think about what you could do better the next time, etc. That is what is needed to ensure that you are going to be getting yourself up to the standard ready to pass this exam. And you think back to the first section where I spoke about how if you work hard, you can pass in 1 attempt. This is a key thing to do if you do want to be that student that passes first time. Practice makes perfect. It's not just a phrase. It is incredibly relevant to the strategic case study exam. But it's not just about your performance in the actual exam. After all, your performance in the exam is only going to be a reflection of the work you have put in. And therefore, the 6 to 8 weeks that you spend in advance of the exam studying is very important. And it's important that you plan your studies effectively. So think of a marathon runner. Now, you don't just get up one day and think, you know what, there's a marathon on tomorrow. Yeah, I'm probably going to run it. You know, I've done no training. I'm out of shape. I'm this, that, and the other. But you know what? I kind of feel like running a marathon, so I'll just do that tomorrow. Of course you don't do that. You plan in advance. You plan your training. You make sure you go out and run. You make sure that you are meeting those milestones. Okay, it's a month in advance of the marathon. I'm going to try and run 15 miles in the first week. I'm going to up that to 20 miles in the second week. Then I'm going to run the full marathon distance in the third and fourth week to ensure that I am ready for the marathon. And that's exactly what you need to be doing when preparing for your strategic case study exam. You need to plan your studies effectively. And effective study plans are, firstly, written down. And the reason for this is that it creates a commitment towards a specific goal. You write down what you want to have achieved and when you want to have achieved it by. But it's not just enough to create an end goal. You have to monitor and track your performance towards that goal. And this keeps that goal in mind, keeps you moving towards that goal, and it also provides you feedback when you are not moving towards that goal. So again, using the runner analogy, if they are committing to having run a certain distance by a certain time, they can also monitor the progress so far. Right, I've got to have achieved 20 miles in 3 hours within 3 weeks. And at the end of the first week, I'm running 20 miles in 4 hours. So I now need to work on my time to try and speed up to reach that end goal. What this means for you as a student, and what I often suggest as a tutor, is you look at the time that you have before your exam, and you look at everything you want to cover before your exam. You then allocate a number of hours per week, and you create a spreadsheet, and you slot in every single thing that you need to cover over the course of that 6 to 8 week plan. And this is good for a number of ways. It means that you know, as long as you stick to your plan, you will cover everything you need to cover, because the plan has considered everything and it has planned for everything. It also gives you an advantage in that it tells you what you are going to be studying on certain days. How many of you have got into a situation where you've sat down, right, I've got a couple of hours, I'm going to study, what should I look at? Should I do some exam practice? Should I look at the pre-scene? Should I look at some theory? I don't know what to do. And then you eventually choose something, but then your mind is full of, well, should I be looking at this instead? You are, in a sense, thinking of the opportunity cost of studying this theory. Rather than studying this theory, I could be looking at the pre-scene. Maybe I should stop and look at the pre-scene. But if you've got a plan in place that is going to cover everything, you know that you can clear your mind and focus on this one thing. There's no risk of missing out on something else because the plan will consider that. The plan will have factored in time to look at that other thing at a later date. So as long as you stick to your plan, you will cover everything, and there's no need to worry about what you are going to be looking at and wasting time worrying about when you're looking at this thing, you're not looking at something else. So that is why a plan is so important. And it's not just enough to plan either. You have to create a good environment for yourself to study. And this is really, really important as well, because it is better to spend half an hour studying effectively than it is to spend 2 hours studying where there's so much going on that you actually don't learn anything. You take nothing in that 2 hour period because you're distracted by this, you're distracted by that, and there's plenty of stories to provide evidence of this. Another one here is another student that we once had on our course, and they were always performing really badly. They were putting in the hours, to be fair, but they just weren't learning anything. And the reason for this was that they were constantly watching television while they were studying under the guise of, oh, I need some background noise to help me study. And then they were constantly on their phone and on their social media and Facebook notifications, Twitter notifications, constantly popping up. And every time they popped up, they would look away from what they were studying. And so that could be a few minutes lost every single time that happens, because even if you just spend 10 seconds looking at that notification, the time it takes you to get out of that zone and back into the study zone is going to amount up, particularly if it happens time and time again. And it sounds like really soft advice, but it makes a substantial difference to how effective your revision is going to be. And as I said earlier, if you spend less time studying, but it is effective study time, that's actually better than spending countless hours of completely ineffective study time. So, things like mobile phones. Yes, we all have our mobile phones with us all the time at the moment, but for now, get rid of your mobile phone. Put it to the side and don't look at it until you have finished studying. If you've set yourself time to study, all you should be doing within that period is studying. There's nothing on Facebook that is that important for you to look at right now. Also, music. Some people do find listening to music, particularly classical music, can be very helpful when they are studying. But if you're listening to death metal and rap and all these sorts of things, and it's loud and it's distracting you, then cut it out. It's not helping you create the right study environment. Also, the same for television and for your computer as well. Unless you need your computer for what you are studying, by all means, turn it off. Particularly if you've got email notifications coming in every few minutes, and then you look at the email, etc., and then you are taking yourself out of that revision, that study zone. And of course, the same goes for social media, for Facebook, for Twitter, for LinkedIn, for Instagram, all these different social media apps. Close them down, get rid of them. They'll still be there in several hours' time when you have finished your studying. But they're not going to help you to study effectively. They're not going to help you pass the exam. So cut them off. And it's always important to find yourself a nice, quiet place to work. People don't generally absorb information better in loud, noisy, distracting environments. So find a quiet place and avoid distractions. And if you live with people, if you've got flatmates, you've got housemates, or you have a spouse, you have children, etc., then ask them nicely to not disturb you while you are studying. And if you create that environment for yourself, if you create an environment that is actually going to allow you to study effectively, then your study time will be better spent. And this is particularly important when you are doing your mock exams. Because remember, a mock exam is just not a replication of the real thing in content sense. It's supposed to be a replication of the real thing in a total sense. Now, you are not going to have your phone with you in the exam. You are not going to have people around you in the exam. You are not going to have your textbooks with you in the exam. Everything that is not going to be present on the day of the exam should be cut out. I've had plenty of instances in the past where students have said to me that they do their mock exams, they sometimes spend a bit of extra time just to finish it off. They have their textbook open just in case they need a key bit of information. They keep their annotated pre-scene with them just so they can look at the pre-scene. Don't do any of that, because you will not get any of that in the real exam. And if it's not going to be something that is representative of what you will get in the real exam, cut it out, because otherwise you are kidding yourself. You are not really preparing for the exam if you are not sitting your mock exams under exam conditions. So thank you for watching this video. I hope you have enjoyed it, and more importantly, you have found it useful. I'd like to finish by just telling you a few things about the products that we produce here at Astranti and the ones that are part of our course. So these materials can all be purchased as part of the course or purchased individually. So we have our study text. We have 3 study texts for all the objective test exams. So 3 study texts for E1, P1, F2, F3, etc. But we also have the study text specifically for the case study exams, split into 2 parts. The first is about how to approach the exam, how to analyze the information, how to plan your answers, how to write your answers, and also the second part, which looks at the key theories from the objective test levels that are relevant to the particular case study. So if you are looking at P2, F2, E2 for the management exam, F3, P3, E3 for the strategic case study exam, and so on. We have our course videos, which look at how to plan your answers, how to manage your time effectively. These are the key reasons why people fail the exam. We have our pre-scene analysis, which looks at the pre-scene in a lot of depth, applies key information to that, and also concludes with the strategic analysis, where we look at the various different models in the CIMA syllabus and apply them to the case, and also the top 10 most likely issues to arise in your exam. Generally, we have a 70 to 80% accuracy rate on our top 10 issues. Our industry pack, which details in great depth the history and the current contemporary issues within the particular industry that the pre-scene is based on. We also have 20 to 25 industry examples that you can use within your answers. We have mock exams that can be purchased with or without marking and feedback, where you can get some real exam practice in, look for the kinds of things that the examiner is going to bring up in the exam, and also get marking and feedback from expert markers who have marked for CIMA and for us for many years, who know exactly the kind of things that the examiner is looking for, exactly the kinds of mistakes that students often make, and can provide lots of detailed feedback to ensure that you improve on your performance. We also have our master classes, which are 2 day-long classes which look at all the key issues facing students in the exam. We will also go through live planning, showing you how to plan your answers effectively, how to write your answers effectively. Again, key things that cause people to fail the strategic case study exam, or any of the case study exams for that matter. And also, if you do sign up for our course, provided that you have filled out your forms, provided that you have submitted your mocks, provided you have done everything to show that you have really given it your all to try and pass this exam, we also offer a pass guarantee, giving a free resit to anyone who fails the exam.